Oh, well, I put it at hobo because I don't like arm exercises.
It goes in hobo tier. What's up, fellas? Today I'm bringing y'all my annual exercise selection tier list for 2024. We're going to break this tier list down into 4 chapters, one starting with the intro, some must-haves, and then some controversial picks to get y'all talking in the comments to get some discussion going. 2 is going to be influencer picks, movements that I either learned or modalities that I've learned or attribute to other content creators that I watch now or have watched in the past. 3 is just going to be some of my picks that I'm going to put in a separate tier above mutant tier. And then last but not least, and most importantly, is 4, your picks as the viewer. We're going to rank everything that I picked from you guys' suggestions, and that'll top things off at chapter 4. I'll be giving my current and unfiltered opinions on all the things that we talk about today, along with golden tidbits for each of the exercises as well, even the crappy ones, and not necessarily just talking about how good or bad I think they are, which is the pitfall that a lot of tier lists fall into. Remember to like the video right now and subscribe, and as always, let me know what you think about what we talk about today. The purpose of this tier list overall is to show you practical exercise selection 1, 2, allow you to weed out trendy exercises that present themselves as being better than the basics when they're really just as good as the basics or sometimes worse. And then 3, just pick exercises that you find are fun, because buy-in is very important, and if you're not having fun with what you're doing, you're not going to continue to do it. All to help you make your own programs or customize the templates that you find online to make them as good as possible. And tier lists are just a fun way of doing that, bro. Okay, like I'm gonna keep doing them. They're just fun. All right, so getting into the criteria. The grading system is really simple this year. 1, how well does the movement do across a variety of builds, whether you're built like this or built like that. If it works across people of all shapes and sizes, I'm going to rate the movement highly because of that. 2, how chatty is the movement? And for those that don't speak internet brain rot, that's just meathead for me saying how cool I think a movement is. So if I say this is ridiculously chatty, this is ridiculously cool. If I say it's not chatty at all, it's not cool at all, okay? Makes sense? How loadable is it? Not only in terms of weight, but also reps. That's important to consider. Progressive overloadability is very important, and if you can't do that, it's going to be C tier at best, even if it gives you a good mind-muscle connection. You know, its utility is loaded. Importantly, how jacked and how strong does the dang lift actually get you over the long term? If it looks cool and it ain't getting you jacked, bro, it's going in hobo tier. It's going in D tier. And then last but not least, are there any X factors that make it not practical in terms of, utility being good or bad, setup time being good or bad, being a popular machine that's always used, things of that nature? Is there anything other than those things that would make the movement better or worse, basically? Now, finally, before we get on to the actual tier list, I'm not going to read the freaking tiers out to you. By now, you've had the opportunity to read them yourself. What I want you to think of in terms of the grading is not that S good and B worse than S. S is better in my opinion, but listen, this will make sense, all right? So B tier is just going to be basic, foundational exercises that work well for most people. A and S tiers are just going to be better versions of those exercises. So if we have, say, for example, actually I won't spoil anything. I'll just let you see how it'll work. Going right into chapter 1. What is the most important thing? The 2 most important things. 1, running a good program. 2, eating to support your training, hydrating, having good outside the gym variables, consistent effort, and high buy-in. I picked fork to mouth as the exercise and the icon here, because typically with these tier lists I'll put cluck and bell to signify the calorie surplus, but I figured I'd mix it up this time. If you're not running a good program and you're not eating to support your training, you're wasting your time. Go take up knitting or play video games or something. This hobby is not for you. Now, if you want a good program to run for free, mine are in the description right now on Boostcamp. Raider is completely free and my most popular program. If you are interested in the pro subscription, you get a free 2 weeks with code OMNI. Get to try it out for 2 weeks and cancel it if you don't want it. And then you have access to my pro program, Dragon Fist, which is really, really good program. The closest thing to coaching that you would get for the least amount of money spent. Also, in the S tier, triple S's, before we get into the first big fat controversial lift, okay? I got a picture of the big jawline Chad Guts here from Berserk to signify my Berserk Method staple lifts. Berserk Method is my self-coaching resource that I put out every year for free. I'm on the 4th edition. Please check out the 2024 edition now if you haven't already. My aim with the Berserk Method is to teach you everything that you need to know to coach yourself without paying someone. It's totally free. There's no ads on the 2024 edition. If you're willing to invest the time, you'll know exactly how to make a program, you know exactly how to coach yourself, you know exactly how to troubleshoot, and you know everything that you need to coach yourself. Because, one, not all of us have the money for coaching, and even the ones that have it, the questions that people have on the internet, in my experience, don't require you shelling out $200-$400 a month, right? Because it's just not that real, bro. So watch the Berserk Method 2024. The Berserk Method staple lifts, and this is what that signifies, are a list of about 10 lifts per edition that I find that I prescribe very often with people who I do actually end up coaching. Now, the first controversial pick, and just so we're not being, favoritism here, I made sure I picked the baldy for this one, okay? A baldy, just like me. The free weight pullover is a terrible exercise in my opinion, man. I'm tired of acting like I don't feel that way, because every time I end up doing it, I'm like, yeah, pullovers, and then I do them for one session, then I don't do them for 6 months until I try them out again. They're a bad exercise in my opinion because, one, we'll just list a few things. They're a worse back exercise than any pull down, row, or hip hinge, fact. They're a worse tricep exercise than any extension, press down, or press, fact. They're worse than any press for pecs, fact. The reason for that is that there's no tension on the majority of the range of motion. You can end up doing lengthened partials, but I just find that it's just not an effective exercise because you don't have tension on the majority of the range of motion, or even in a majority of the lengthened part of the muscle groups. So like when your lats are most lengthened, for the majority of that more lengthened position, there's no tension at all. It's really just at the very bottom. It's really just at the very bottom. The only reason I'm not putting this in the only reason why I'm not clicking this gear right here and making an F tier, super hobo tier F, is because they look ridiculously chatty. Now, I don't present problems without presenting solutions. A pullover motion, for a lot of reasons, makes a lot of sense. Oh, and one more thing to mention, that rib cage expansion stuff, I don't know how true that is. I've never done them for long enough to see that benefit, so I'm not going to comment on that. But a pullover type motion does make sense for a lot of reasons. And if you do a machine pullover, suddenly the strength curve has tension throughout the full range of motion. You can still do lengthened partials on this if that's what you want to do, but it has better strength curve for actually slamming your lats and your teres major, which are the muscles that are most under tension with the pullover. The big thing is that it doesn't fatigue your elbow, so it's great for filling in extra back volume if you're already doing a lot of pulling or arms or things like that. We all want to get 20-inch arms, so we're all doing a lot of curls, we're doing the triple arm days, we're doing all that, right? Say your elbows are fatigued and you still want to work your back a little bit. You can do machine pullovers. You could do them on a cable station, so like a lat prayer, or if you're lucky enough to have a Nautilus pullover or a pullover knockoff machine, you can just do that. Another little golden tidbit that I'm gonna leave y'all with for the next before the next controversial pick rather, is that pullovers on a machine are really good to pre-fatigue the lats, to give you a better mind-muscle connection on your rows if you find that you have trouble activating your lats or your upper back on a row or a pull down. If your lats are either a little bit sore or they're pumped with blood, you can physically feel if they're contracting on those exercises, where if you're fresh and you're not pumped or sore yet, you're not going to feel those things. So keep that in mind. Next controversial pick. I say this in every freaking tier list video, but I usually put it a little bit into the video, like an hour in. I'm going to put it at the beginning because most people need to hear this. Obscure lifts like barbell leg press, Jefferson curls, Jefferson deadlifts, odd lifts in general. Straight. You thought I was going to put it in A tier. It's going straight in D tier, bro. It's going straight in D tier, and let me tell you why. One, overall, we've made better exercises that are versions of this that are just safer, more effective for the most part. Some of them we still do. Like I think technically the overhead press is an old-timey, odd, weirdo lift. We still do that, and it's still a great exercise today. Overall, with most of these exercises, there's less general size built, less general strength built as well. And all of these lifts are just way less effective than a basic exercise. Like, I'm gonna be real with you, bro. When it comes to doing a barbell leg press, it's less effective than, say, a Hindu squat. It's 10 times more dangerous. The setup is extremely obtuse, and it doesn't even look cool, bro. You're doing all this to do something that doesn't even look cool. The only reason why this is not getting into super hobo tier is because some of the odd lifts look cool. And I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Rick De La Thick, Sticky Ricky, Eric Bugenhagen made the odd lifts cool for a while, bro. That's the only reason I feel like a lot of people did them in that era. I'm gonna be real with you, man. If it wasn't for him, it'd be going in super hobo tier. And that's off the strength of him being a ridiculous Chad. Alright? Y'all let me know what you think about those two controversial picks. Again, I don't present problems without solutions. I picked the big three icon, even though I got cut off a little bit there. This is just meant to signify your basic barbell squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, row. Anything with a barbell, any barbell exercise. Going with the premise that B tier is just basic bread and butter foundational lift, and anything above or below it is either a better version of a basic lift or a worse version of it, or just a shit tier exercise. It makes sense to put the basic exercises in B tier as a baseline. Anything above it improves an element of the basic lift. The reason why I don't put it in S tier is because I'm talking about as an average across most people. Some people are better built for squats, some people are better built for deadlifts, worse built for deadlifts, worse built for squats, worse built for bench, better built, so on and so forth. Some people might find that squats are S tier, deadlifts are D tier. Some people might find that bench is S, squat is C tier, right? But most of them work well enough if you get good at them in terms of how you perform them well to target the muscles for it to be in B tier overall. That's how I feel about that, bro. Let me know what you think about that. And also, if Sticky Ricky happens to be freaking listening to this video with his hounds snoring and farting in the background, I'm not saying that these are bad exercises. I'm just saying that there are versions of the basics that are just Super Saiyan versions of them, bro. That's all I'm saying. Now, moving right into Chapter 2. We're going to have some returning entries from last year, along with some new ones. And in terms of the returning ones, I've had more time to think about them critically in terms of how I feel about them across the board. So we're going to go right off with the most prevalent one right now, in my opinion, in terms of who's killing it with the content game, is Dr. Mike and the Technique Cyborg modality. Used to be called Full ROM, but now I guess that's what we're calling it now, Technique Cyborg. I think it's a mixed bag overall, but it's A tier overall, and let me tell you why. There are some definite gaps in the modality for natural lifters, in my opinion. And by natural lifters, I'm not saying that to discriminate from people who roid. I'm just saying that it's a different set of things that work when you take roids versus things that'll work if you're natural. Meaning you can just get a pump or just exist on roids and grow muscle. Versus as an advanced natural lifter or even an intermediate natural lifter, you're not going to continue to get bigger or stronger unless you do certain things well. And that's not to say that if you do the things well on roids, you don't get a better result. But all things equal, you can go sit on the couch along with some other Johnny One Plate, and the only difference between you and him is you took roids, and you'll be bigger than he is. Y'all are both sitting on the couch Dorito blasting, but you're taking roids. That's all to say I'm not making it a moral issue, just to preface everything. It's honest truth. Some shit works different for natural lifters than it does for enhanced lifters. Overall, though, preamble aside, the idea of the system is to elevate the basics, the B tier stuff that we just ranked, right? Which overall, I think it does really well for certain muscle groups and maybe not as well for others. But in my experience overall, slowing down your tempo, pausing under tension, all of that is really good for your joints and your overall integrity. And in terms of that, just your long-term health. It's really good for calisthenics too, to getting actual good work out of calisthenics so that you don't have to load a bunch of weight on them. Now, pausing under tension and slowing under control in the way that they teach it is different from what I say, which is just to use a common sense cadence, right? Don't be a try hard. Don't do a 15-second negative, 12-second pause. Not that they say that either, but it's to paint a picture, right? Just lower the weight under control, pause if it's applicable, and horse the weight, right? With good form. Now, where I say that it's limited is trading load for tempo and tension works really well for some muscles and some movements, and it doesn't for others. Works really well for the legs, which, if we're to rank them categorically, technique cyborg squats, hip hinges, hamstring curls, anything for the thighs, straight S tier, bro. I know tons of people that squat no more than 315 for a bunch of deep, slow, paused, controlled reps, and they have better legs than people that squat 500 for 1 to parallel and knee wraps with a belt, maybe even above parallel with no eccentric control. It's just the truth, man. I find that that's just been my experience, and it shows not only in natural lifters but enhanced lifters as well, where I think that unilaterally applying that same concept to, say, your arms or your chest is limited comes in that lived experience as a coach and as a lifter. And I'm fucking jacked, bro. I'm not even gonna pretend that I don't think that way about myself. I'm fucking jacked, and I coach plenty of people who are just as jacked, if not more jacked than me sometimes. So this is just my experience. I'm not some Johnny One Plate. I'm prefacing. But for arms, I don't think that this is as effective. And this comes down to the way that I treat exercises within my style of programming. I have performance metrics, and we move these performance metrics as indicators of our growth. I find that it's hard to maximally load an arm exercise if we're trading weight for tempo. And for a lot of arm exercises, spending more time in the eccentric doesn't make a lot of sense because of the way the strength curves on the exercise are. If it's a lengthened, biased movement, yeah, it makes sense. But most curls aren't lengthened, biased. A lot of tricep exercises aren't lengthened, biased, so it doesn't make any sense to me to spend more time on the lowering portion of the movement. I find that it's best to get that heavy weight stimulus that allows you to lift more weight on the accessory exercises later in your program, which is totally fine to do technique cyborg stuff on. After you get that heavy loaded weight stimulus, it makes sense to do technique cyborg stuff after that, right? So if you start off with a heavy barbell curl and you move into preacher curls with a dumbbell, it makes sense to do the technique cyborg because it's a lengthened biased movement and you already hit the heavy load to start with. I don't believe in ramrodding the same stimulus multiple times. It's redundant. And this is a good way of diversifying the stimulus. But as a whole, I just find that it's limited for arms because from what I've seen, they don't have the same philosophy in terms of leading with that heavy loaded movement first before they do the technique cyborg stuff. That's just my opinion. Y'all let me know what you think. Again, in terms of rows and pull downs and things of that nature, I think that the way that the row is coached in particular, along with pull downs and pull ups, it's kind of inconsistent because the way that Dr. Mike coaches the row is not the way that he demonstrates the pull downs, and that's in not moving your torso and lifting the muscle with quote unquote just your back. He uses athletic movement on the pull downs, and I'm not calling bro out or anything like that. It's 100% facts. Go watch him do lat pull downs. It's more of an athletic movement on the pull downs, which I think is totally fine. That's what you should do. Because the truth of the matter is what you can move, quote unquote, strict with no body movement, with no athleticism on a row, is not going to be enough load to adequately load the eccentric in the most lengthened part of the movement, which is what back tends to like in general. So what most people will do, if you're in tune with your body, is they'll naturally allow a little bit of torso movement. I'm not talking about jerking up and down and back and forth to be able to horse weights that you have no business lifting. I'm talking about moving your torso up a little bit to put the back in a better position to lift the weight, and then lowering back under control. That's what I do. That's what you'll see a lot of professional bodybuilders in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s do. That's what you'll see Dr. Mike do when he does lat pull downs. But when he does the rows, he doesn't. He's applying that strict form shit to it, and it just doesn't make sense. Now, one thing that I want you to keep in mind for people who want to practice an athletic row is keeping the velocity consistent from point A to point B. If you're wildly changing velocity, that means you're flinging the weight around and you're not using your muscles. Now for bench and presses, again, I'll put it in C tier. Now we'll make this short because we've been talking about this one for a while. For me, I like the soft touch that they present because I preach that as well. But in movements where we're not getting a full stretch on the pecs, like bench press and overhead press with a barbell, it doesn't make sense to me to spend more time in the lowering phase because at no point in the movement are our pecs fully lengthened, guys. At no point are they fully lengthened. So to me, where it would make sense to spend more time in the eccentric and the lowering phase on, say, a camber bar bench press or a dumbbell bench press, doesn't make sense to do that on a barbell bench press. You would have to hedge that with more load, and that just doesn't happen from what I've seen with barbell bench with the way that they coach it. Last but not least, before we move on, make it real quick. Calisthenics, though, for technique cyborg modality goes straight into A tier. I think that, especially if you're heavier, moving 200, 220, 240 pounds with the upper body with control is really, really good. And again, when you do the pull-ups, just make sure that you use athletic concentric. Don't fling your body through the air, but don't be afraid to move your torso a little bit if that's what it calls for, because if you can get 20 reps like that with a good quality, super slow eccentric, but you moved a little bit on the concentric to get up to the top of the bar, and you're doing that versus, say, 7 perfectly cyborg robotic reps, you're leaving a lot of growth on the table. But for dips and push-ups, yeah, man, go slow, especially after you've already done that heavy loaded bench press, heavy loaded whatever it is first, like we just talked about. But overall, like I said, A tier. I just think that I have some criticisms that, I'm not telling bro he got to change anything because it's his shit. But if you are to apply the advice, that's how I would want you to apply it. Next up, we got our boy Jeff Nippard. Everybody likes to make videos about his videos. I'm talking specifically with this entry about his S tier exercises. I think, man, listen, watching Eric Sticky Ricky freaking react to 2 exercises and scream for an hour and a half is hilarious. And I definitely always tune in. And listening to the hounds fart and snort and snarl and snore over him while he's talking is hilarious. But I will say that a lot of his S tiers do make sense. I think that some of them are nerd stuff, for lack of a better term. I'm not calling bro a nerd. I'm just saying so you understand what I'm saying. More so lifter amnesia than nerd shit. Put it better that way. It's advanced lifter amnesia. You forgot what worked for you the first time and you're just prescribing something that's novel to you now. But overall, if you do his S tiers, you're not going to not be jacked. And he doesn't sacrifice load as a consequence of tempo or anything like that. Quick limitation that I think that's technique cyborg stuff for the beginner level lifter, in my opinion, is a lot of folks will get it fucked up, in my opinion. So whereas someone like Dr. Mike or Jared Feather or any of the roided mutant level lifters will understand this, you're not trading load in expensive tempo. You're using a tempo that gives you a better stimulus to fatigue ratio, and as a result of that, you get a better workout with less weight. But they're always, for the most part, other than, come on, Mike, you're using them 15-pound dumbbells on those curls, man. I gotta call bullshit on that, bro. I tried them and I used 40 pounds. Okay, and I wasn't. That's a movement where you can't use bad form. Maybe it was a deload, but that Instagram clip I saw was hellacious, brother. I don't know. I hope that means ridiculous. I'm no linguist, but it sounds funny. But all jokes aside, for the most part, those gentlemen are using appropriate weights. People who are newer might think, oh, I'm going to use a small weight and just my tempo will make it more stimulative. You see the difference with that? Talking a little bit about, trendy stuff right now. We got our man Sam Sulik here. I'm going to put his stuff in B tier. And that may seem crazy to people because they may like him better than Jeff or Dr. Mike. I don't feel one way about the content over another. But from what I've observed, he's a chatty ego lifter that just does what he does across his exercises. He focuses on progressive overload. He picks movements that feel good. He switches them out when they feel stale. As a foundation, that's everything that you should be doing. But again, things like not touching the chest on the incline press, swinging the curls around, there's room for improvement to make it more A tier or S tier. That's just my honest opinion. He's obviously jacked. He obviously knows what he's doing. It's just that if he wanted to do certain things better, he could do some things better. If for me to put this in S tier would be glazing him because he's jacked, he's charismatic, and he's lovable. That would be truly glazing him. Because to look, if you saw me right now do barbell bench press and I didn't touch my chest, you'd say something about it. That's the facts. I'm gonna just leave it at that. Last thing in the current discussion is the whole lengthened partials thing. I picked the man himself, Dr. Milo Wolf, just because he's pretty emblematic of the lengthened partials thing. Funny story about how I met Dr. Wolf before we get into this. I met him in the most me way possible, meaning I tend to run into people at weird times. But fellas, anyway, we were at a restaurant in Ohio for the Arnold. And I had just got done taking a whiz, and I had busted ass, just like one of Sticky Ricky's pit bulls. And mind you, this is a small bathroom. No sooner than I busted cheeks, in walks Dr. Milo Wolf while I'm washing my hands. Wow, that's embarrassing, and I'm just hoping that he can't smell. But yeah, man, we had a cool brief conversation, and he's a cool guy from what I can see. And for fellas that like to chirp that he's small or skinny, he's the real deal, okay? He doesn't have a spider physique either. I think as a whole, you're naturally going to do lengthened partial exercises on certain things. So like tricep overhead extensions, or a lot of people when they do push-ups, they do lengthened partials. You're naturally doing this sometimes anyway. I think some of those things look chattier than others, but as a whole, I think I'm going to put it in A tier. And overall, I'm not mad at it. I think that just being mad at it because it's different from what you think is childish. I think to just call someone small because you don't agree with what they think is childish. I think if that's the first thing you think about, maybe you should question why you feel that way. That's just my opinion. Eat the meat and spit out the bones. If the shoe fits, wear it. I'm not talking about anybody. I'm just talking about human nature and things that I have observed throughout the course of my life. But I do think that there are limitations. First and foremost, there are strength-specific benefits to doing the full range of motion, which in my opinion of itself is a reason not to solely do lengthened partials if you care about that. But most muscle groups have at least one exercise where it not only makes sense to do lengthened partials, the exercise just works better. So A tier is all about elevating the basics. The lengthened partial shit does have some limitations in my opinion, and I'm not saying my mind isn't open to changing on that. I don't have all the experience in the world. Maybe I'm wrong with things that I think, but there are limitations that stop it from being S tier. But in terms of the strength-specific benefits of doing a full range of motion, I mean having full stability and mobility throughout the full range of motion, full strength throughout the full range of motion. I find that for some people it's also hard to standardize their reps. If you're experienced, that'll be less difficult than if you're less experienced. But if you're a Johnny One Plate, you just started going to the gym, it's going to be harder for you to do that effectively. But yeah, overall, really, really good. We're going to move into a few other influencer picks. I'm going to start with an exercise that I started doing religiously because of good friend Bromar. Let's see where it is. I'm looking for the Bulgarian split squat. If I can't find it in 2 seconds. Oh, here we go. So the Bulgarian split squat. I got this jacked, bald gentleman doing them. I'm going to put them in A tier. And let me tell you why. A little story about why I started doing them as well. So when I met Bromar, and this is Omar Isov for those that don't understand the nomenclature, or the nickname rather. I met Bromore, I would say, about a year ago, maybe a year and change ago. And at that time, and even now, something that we talked about is muscle groups that we wanted to bring up and where we thought more potential was yet to be claimed, right? So overall, I have a very, very developed physique overall, and at that time I still did, but I had more area of opportunity to grow in my legs than I did in my upper body, so I was doing a lot more leg volume. And I kind of just was experimenting a lot still at that point. He introduced me to the Bulgarian split squat, pretty much with a lengthened partial, funnily enough. It lets me stay more upright, and it lets all people stay more upright than a squat, even if you're built for squats, just because of you being able to lean forward on that front leg like this bald, handsome gentleman is. And because of that, you're able to target your quads more effectively without stimulating your posterior chain, essentially. This, for me, is probably my single best quad exercise, and I do think that it's a better fit for most people, especially if you go deep, than a barbell back squat. That's just the truth, man. Unless you're really, really built for squats, this is just going to work better for quads as a pure developmental exercise for the quads. There are still other reasons to do back squats, like having good strength and stability throughout all of the muscle groups working together at once. That's a really good benefit. But this, on top of working the quads well, also allows your hips to internally rotate a bit better, which is something that you don't get on squats typically. So it's a good reason to do both. Chin-ups. This was something that Faz Lifts, good friend Faz Lifts, asked me to rank. He said that chin-ups and touch-and-go deadlifts, which is a controversial one, if I do say so myself. He doesn't have to tell me why he thinks that. I think I know what he's talking about, and he can chime in about this if he wants. He can tell me if I'm wrong or not. We'll talk about the chin-ups first. I think that weighted chin-ups, I think that they are a better back exercise in terms of the lats than a basic barbell row. That's if you do them well and with good form, and you're not using load at the expense of form. If you use load at the expense of form, I think they're C tier, because I see plenty of people with 2-plate weighted pull-ups doing it all fucked up that have tiny backs, right? But when done well, C tier. When done well, rather A tier. Touch and go deadlifts, though, is one that most people by reaction would throw straight into either D tier or put it right into freaking super hobo tier, F tier. I'm trying to find the goddamn icon that I used. I even put touch and go deadlift on the icon, or picked one that said touch and go deadlift. If I can't find it in 2 seconds, I'm just gonna put it on later. But the reaction for most people was to put touch and go deadlift right into the D tier, because most people bounce it off the floor. I was watching a video of a fella. It was an Indian fella, and he was extremely jacked, right? But he was basketball bouncing these deadlifts off the floor, and that's what most people think about when they think about touch and go deadlifts. A good touch and go deadlift is controlling the bar on the eccentric, and you're just basically not dead stopping on the floor. You're not necessarily bouncing off the floor. You're touching the floor and you're coming back up. The time under tension on this is crazy, and the only reason I don't put it in S tier is because I feel like there is a hip hinge that is better. But this is certainly better than a regular conventional deadlift, to lift the most amount of weight possible, you're either going to be skipping the eccentric or guiding it down. You're not going to be controlling it and keeping a constant tension on your posterior chain and back the whole time. But a well done touch and go deadlift is A tier. It's something that is demonized, and it shouldn't be. Now next up, and Alex didn't suggest this, but good friend Alex Leonidas, and that's how you say his name. That's what he told me when I met him in person. I attribute to him to doing calisthenics in general, but lately the super wide grip pull-up. And I'm going to pick legendary lifter Franco Colombo to signify this, because he's the OG. He did them most prevalently, and he certainly did them before we did them. I'm going to put them in S tier just because I feel like that they are just the chin-up, but brought to the pinnacle of back isolation. I think it takes your arms a lot out of the equation. I think that it puts them in a good leverage for the back to be strong and to work well. A lot of people were saying that the super wide grip didn't do that, and then the studies came out and they basically had to shut the heck up about that because they were just dead wrong on that one. It just makes sense. Arms wide makes the back wide. It's almost like it makes sense, brothers. Also, it makes your back look super jacked while you're doing it. It makes it look like a pure Dorito. ATG Good Mornings is something that he does a lot lately. Maybe the past couple years or so. He's always been Team Good Morning, and I've always acknowledged the benefits of Good Mornings when done the way that he does them, while also saying that I typically tend to prefer RDLs. And while I do think that RDLs are probably a better developmental exercise overall because they work the back, I can't deny that the ATG Good Morning is just the pinnacle of a hip hinge. It's far better than a conventional deadlift. You can keep a constant tension on it, just like with the touch and go deadlift. It doesn't work your upper back that much, or at all. Your lats, your teres major, any of the muscles in your rotator cuff. It pretty much is just a pure butt cheeks and lower back and hamstring lift, but it brings it to the pinnacle while having a great stretch on all the muscles. Less loading is needed while still sufficiently stimulating you for strength because how long the moment arm is. And yeah, just overall great exercise. Another S tier. I first learned about this one from, I think it was Josh Bryant that I first heard about this from, but it's the unbroken back squat. And you can apply this to any leg exercise of choice. So like unbroken hack squat, unbroken leg press, unbroken leg extension, anything. Basically, you're not rest pausing at the top or wherever you're able to rest at on the motion. I think that it takes that guessing game of was this squat hard enough? Was this squat too hard? It takes it completely out because when you don't rest at the top, one, you're getting more out of less weight, better mind-muscle connection, constant tension on the muscle. You could still do the deep stretch and the pauses and the slow eccentric and all that. It just takes the squat and elevates it to a level to where it's just notably and dramatically better of a developmental exercise for muscle building purposes. I think Johnny Candido just made a video about it as well, but he didn't come up with it. It's something that I've been prescribing to. Shout out to Freddie. We've been doing those for the better part of 2 years now. That's a variation that he's been doing for a long time. Moving on. Fitness FAQs. He was gracious enough to have me on his podcast, and we talked about how awesome we thought rings are. Now, in terms of how I feel about rings, I don't do them so much anymore just because I just happen to want to use dumbbells and cables right now. But in terms of compound movements, ring exercises, I made entire videos about these. They just stimulate the upper body so well. So ring rows, ring pull-ups, ring push-ups, ring dips, all fantastic exercises to do as hypertrophy movements. If you want more info about how I feel about those and my full opinions, there's a lot that goes into it. Watch some of those videos in my playlist. That's in terms of the compound movements, though. In terms of ring isolations, though, and where I have to just be honest and make the delineation is that I just think that they're dog shit. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think that if you're someone who's a calisthenics athlete or you love calisthenics as developmental tools, it makes sense to use weights where it's practical to do so. I just don't find that the ring stuff feels good. Some of them are too difficult for people who aren't that strong to get into. The ones that you can scale aren't necessarily better than a dumbbell or a cable. In fact, they're notably worse. Let's just put it this way, man. And I know no professional bodybuilders do ring push-ups, though, but they do perform pull-ups and push-ups and dips and things of that nature. You're not going to see any professional bodybuilder, natural or not, doing ring curls as a main builder for their biceps. It just doesn't make sense. Again, I don't present problems without also presenting solutions. I think that there are two ways to do isolations that are even better. You'll never guess what they are. Guess right now in the comments. What's the modality that we're going to do for the isolations? We're going to use cables. We're going to grab cables and throw them in here first. I picked John Meadows because I learned a lot about isolation with both dumbbells and cables from John Meadows. Rest in peace. From cables and dumbbells. Here's a picture of John Meadows. I don't know if that's the one I picked for him. If it's not, then we'll go back and fix it if we need to. I'm going to put the cable isolation in S and then the dumbbell isolation in A. This is an icon of him doing what I call Meadows hammer curls. It's just a curl that he came up with that the Johnny One Plates on TikTok try to pass off as their own. He came up with it first. Again, John Meadows, infinite resources in terms of knowledge for bodybuilding, strength training. There's so many things that he was just ahead of the game on. I picked him for dual rope tricep extensions for the icon as well. Cables are better than dumbbells for isolation, but not so much better that it's just like you wouldn't get maximally jacked for the most part if you chose to do dumbbells because you think they look chattier. I just think cables are better overall because you can manipulate the strength curve a little bit by moving the cable up or down, moving back or forth, so on and so forth. And you can't really do the same thing with the same degree of customization with a dumbbell. Moving on. Something that I learned from a good friend Sam Sheether is the jetpack workout. Now, what is a jetpack and why is that relevant to strength training? I went ahead and picked the Bells of Steel SSB just because on average I feel like Bells of Steel has the best safety squat bar in terms of cost for value. We just released the SS4, which has knurling on the handles, and it's a really good filling bar. I think that the jetpack workout, which just refers to the safety squat bar if you weren't picking up on that, I think that goes in A tier. I think a safety squat bar is more people can do it well despite their build than people can do a high bar squat well, right? So if you have long femurs, because the camber is in front of you and it's counterbalancing you, you're going to be able to do a deep squat easier than with a barbell and with less mobility. I think that it makes the good morning exercise better because, again, it puts that moment arm more in front. I think it loads up calf exercises really well. So the jetpack workout, I'm not going to gatekeep it anymore. First, you do SSB squats. Then you do SSB good mornings. Then I believe you do SSB calf raises. I might be missing one other thing, but that's the Sam Sheether patented freaking jetpack workout. Last two exercises are ones that I got from a really nice fella that I encountered on Instagram. He goes by Jimmy House. Great name, by the way, because he's extremely jacked. I do believe that he's a natural lifter as well because, one, he says he is, and two, he obviously has really good genetics. And you can see the totality of his journey. And also, given his genetics, his performance compared to people who roid. That's just an endorsement of the fella. That's just my opinion. Like, could he be lying about it? Sure. But I think he's a natural athlete, and he's fucking jacked. Look at he has 20-inch arms, seemingly. The two exercises that I got from him are preacher easy bar curls, particularly the way that he does them, and then dumbbell preacher curls, the way that he does them. The way that he coaches them, I'm going to put them in S and A tier respectively. Or that has to be switched around. The dumbbell one goes in S tier. The easy bar one goes in A tier. I think that the dumbbell is better than the barbell just because a little easier on the wrists. A lot easier to get a full stretch for most people as well from what I've seen. But the way that he coaches them, and I've read articles of old school guys talking about this in the same way, but you do the bent wrist. And if you can even bend your wrist now and then bring your arm down just with no weight, and you'll feel your bicep and your forearm stretch a lot more than if you were to extend your wrist. The way that he coaches the preacher curls uses that cue, and I learned it from him. And since I started experimenting with that on different curls, it's been really cool. You know, it's novelty. I feel like it works better because it's stimulating the forearm muscle and stretching the bicep a little bit more or a little bit better. And it's just letting me farm a new lift. Really cool. Check him out. Jimmy House on Instagram. You search him up, you'll find him. Now, we're going to make a separate tier for this. Like I said, we were. We'll add a row above. And again, this isn't because I think that this is like so much better than all these exercises. It has to be in its own tier. It's just to differentiate them from them, just for people who are interested in what my personal favorite lifts in each major category are. And I'll talk about what the categories and what I mean by that are. But we're going to call this Dragon Slayer. And we're going to make this, instead of yellow, let's make it pink. Yeah. Alright, Dragon Slayer. My personal picks for my favorite exercises for each major performance metric. And this is chapter 3, by the way. Starting off with horizontal presses, I think that probably the best chest exercise, in my opinion, is the cambered bar bench press. I really like the Bells of Steel cambered bar. It's a deep camber on top of being something that has a really good knurling on it as well. If you want to use like a dollar store Amazon deep camber bar for the camber bar press, take a shot every time I say camber bar. But if you wanted to use the Amazon version for whatever reason, you can. I mean, you get what you pay for in that regard. I say Bells of Steel because I can ensure the quality. But the reason that this is really good is that it combines the stability of a barbell bench press with the range of motion of a really well-performed dumbbell bench press. Fully lengthens the pecs, gives you way more stimulation on the pecs. My wife just came home, by the way. Maybe she can help with the rest of the tier list. It's just an overall really good exercise in my opinion. So my pick for the horizontal press is going to be the camber bar bench press. If we're talking my pick for just catch-all shoulder isolation, I'm going to go ahead and say, and this was after a little bit of deliberation actually, I think the Powell raise is the most important. And I hope I actually put the icon in here so you can know what the heck I'm talking about. A more cerebral gentleman would have organized these before pressing record, but we go with the flow around here. I can't see it right away, so we'll go ahead and talk about it and throw it up there maybe at the end when it's isolated. But a Powell raise puts you in a really unique situation where you're loading the stretched portion of your rear delt. And I find that rear delt isolation is important and probably mandatory to do if you're doing a lot of pressing exercises in general. I don't think that just pulls alone does it by itself either. Because I'll tell you what, bro. There's still moments now, and I row a lot, I pull down a lot, I can chin up a lot. There still are moments where I have some shoulder discomfort if I'm not doing my due diligence about doing my rear delt isolation. I'm going to put that in Dragon Slayer tier as my shoulder isolation of choice. Now, if we're talking about a vertical press, I typically, as a Berserk method core staple lift, just say do a seated shoulder press with back support. I tend to prefer the seated Smith machine press. And I actually am going to throw this one up on here because I know for a fact I got an icon and we are going to find it. Where's this guy at? I think I made him bald too so I could see him, but that kind of was my downfall. Because now it's hiding his bald head and I can't see it. Oh, here we go. He wasn't bald. This guy isn't bald. That's why I couldn't find him. I was looking for a bald guy. I think that shoulder presses on a Smith machine are the go-to for me. They're more stable than a barbell shoulder press. For me, unracking sometimes is weird. Sometimes you'll have a rack that's easy to unrack on and easy to get a bench to, and then others it's just not as easy to do that. Whereas with the Smith machine, you don't have to worry about all that. And because it's more stable, I find that you can push the reps a little bit harder. In terms of curls, I have a couple things that I like. I like the Meadows curl that I may have mentioned from John Meadows, but I also really like reverse curls done to the forehead. I really like reverse curls done to the forehead because they give you a full arm pump from forearm to brachialis to bicep. It gives you a full arm pump, and I just find that they're really fun to perform and they make you look jacked while you're doing them. You see all the veins bulging. It's just a lift that I buy into a lot. Oh, come on, I know I freaking got the icon for this. We're gonna go row by row. Verse curls are also something that is really good to use if you tend to have elbow discomfort as well. I find that a lot of times when people tweak their biceps, they tend to tweak the distal side of their biceps. And I find that reverse grip work allows you to work that area well and get it some blood flow to get it feeling better. Where the fuck is the reverse curl at? Whatever. I guess I didn't get it. I really like the Meadows curl as well. That would go, and I actually do have a picture of that. That'll go right in the Dragon Slayer tier. Now, if we're talking about tricep exercises, I connect best with an incline dumbbell extension when it comes to the long head of the triceps. I'm going to put this in Dragon Slayer tier. I find a really hard time connecting with my triceps on most overhead stuff, but I'm guessing because I have that back support, I am able to have more stability while I perform my reps, which just allows me to focus more on what I'm doing as opposed to keeping stability. That's for the long head of the triceps. Now, if we're talking about just a general tricep exercise, I really buy into either straight bar or V-bar press downs, again, because they're more stable. I can drag them against my body to stretch the triceps a little bit better. And I overall just have a good time with them. Something I've really been liking as of late, because they're very stable, again, is the Smith Machine Skull Crusher. I really like the Smith Machine Skull Crusher because, one, again, it's more stable. You can stretch the long head very well. It resembles more of a press in terms of I lay down and Oonga Boonga move the weight, and I just like doing it. And I find that a lot of people, surprisingly, don't really use the Smith Machine because they think it's shit. So I pretty much have free reign over using it and don't have to wait for anyone or working with them. In terms of wrist exercises, forearm isolations in general, it doesn't have to be complicated in my opinion. I just do normal wrist curls. Enough said on that one. Dr. Milo Wolf made an interesting video on forearm isolation. Check that out. Now, in terms of the quads, I talked about this already, but we're going to put the split squats in Dragon Slayer tier. Particularly unbroken, lengthened, biased split squats. Those are my best quad exercise in my opinion. They're not like an S tier exercise by any means, because I do think that there are certain squat exercises that work better for other people in general, but I think that for me it's a really good quad exercise. In general, I think for most people it's more of an A tier exercise though. I also really like sissy squats with heel support. And I got the quad father, Tom Platz. I specifically like doing the sissy squats with heel support. And I don't know why people don't do this, because it takes out the instability factor and really lets you push them a lot harder without having to hold on to a rack or something like that, which would make the reps inconsistent because you never know how much you're assisting yourself. That for me might actually be my best quad builder, now that I think about it. Last but not least is the coveted, the legendary good girl, bad girl machine, specifically for the adductors. I find that adductors are a really, really big muscle that a lot of people don't have developed, or it's developed and it just doesn't have very much tissue tolerance. Like you can't push it very hard before you start to tweak it, or you just can't recover from more squat pattern work. Now, in terms of the back, I like super wide pull-ups, so I would put those in Dragon Slayer tier for me personally. We'll just leave them there for now. I really like rows as well, specifically a row done with that athletic movement that I talked about. We're not flinging the weight up and down. Get in the tier, dude. We're not flinging the weight up and down. We're just moving the torso a little bit to be able to get the bar past our knees and to put the back in a better position to be able to lift the weight. And we're lowering it under control. Imagine you had an egg on the floor that you didn't want to crack with the barbell, right? That's how you want to lower the weight. I also really like stiff leg deadlifts and RDLs and chest supported T-bar rows for the back. Now, in terms of glutes and hamstrings, again, RDLs are really good, but my weapon of choice for the past year has been the deficit leg curl. And I saw this on a Dr. Mike Instagram post once. Just put padding underneath your thighs on a lying hamstring curl. Gives you a better stretch at the bottom. I know that seated leg curls are, per the literature, a better hamstring exercise. But for me personally, I just connect better with the lying ones. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I like the seated ones better. I still do the seated ones because you're going to end up doing both anyway. But I put more emphasis on progression on the lying ones. And I got pretty big fucking hamstrings. You know, I actually don't think that hamstrings are built very well from hip hinges. I'm just going to be honest with you. Because when you look at people who have respectable deadlifts, when they cut down, it'd be their hamstrings that are lacking. Or if you just look at them even before they even cut down, their hamstrings are lacking. It's because they don't hit those leg curls. That's where really get your hamstrings big. In terms of calves, I've been doing something that I learned on Alberto Nunez's Instagram story, which is just body weight calf raises with the really long pauses, which is good if you have long tendons in your calves. The longer your tendons, the longer you should pause, basically. But something else that I've been doing is just calf raises on a leg press. It's easy to load up. It don't take forever. You don't need much weight, and it feels really good. It'll get you nice and sore. Last but not least, for abs, I have two that I really like, and I'm going to highlight one of them just because one of them I talk about on the Berserk Method staple lifts video, and that's going to be the GHD sit-up. I do this because I saw Dan Green do it, and Dan Green is extremely jacked with massive Ninja Turtle abs, an extremely aesthetic physique in my opinion, and this is one of his main builders. You get a good stretch on the full ab musculature, to be honest with you. It's easily loadable. You can throw a dumbbell behind your dome or on your chest, and it looks cool. Weighted sit-ups are freaking cool. That's going to top off chapter 3. I'm going to do one more look for the freaking reverse curl. I almost thought it was this one because the guy kind of was doing a shittier form reverse curl, kind of, but it's really an upright row. I don't see it. We'll see it by the end if it's here. But moving into chapter 4, which is your submissions. These are the things that you suggested and the ones that I thought would make for good video content. First fella wants to know what are my thoughts on machine only. So like only doing machines, and I picked a Terminator for this, you know, the destroyer of humanity. I think that that's fine. I think that it has no Chad points though, because it excludes a lot of cooler looking exercises, but a lot of machine exercises are just plain better versions of basic barbell exercises. A Smith machine hack squat is better than a barbell squat for most people. Smith machine shoulder press, in my opinion, is probably better for building a surplus of shoulder strength and size. A Smith machine bench press might be about equal. But a lot of them, in terms of the specialty machines, the hamstring curl, the hack squat, the leg press, those are all really good exercises that you can't just get with a barbell, and that you wouldn't be missing out of if you choose to exclude the barbell, because you can use the Smith machine, or you can use dumbbells. But yeah, it's fine. There's no Chad points. Can't go in S tier if you don't have any Chad points. Next fella wants to know, what are my thoughts on the log press? Now, I think the log press is jock mode. It has huge jock mode points. I'm going to put it in B tier, though. It's a good foundational exercise. I don't think it's any better, per se, than an overhead press. It keeps the load a little bit more in front of you because how thick the bar is, but it also decreases the range of motion. But at the same time, you're pressing a freaking log over your head. It just looks ridiculously chatty, okay? So we're going to put it in B tier off the strength of that alone. I had a different icon for odd lifts. Maybe I'll put the barbell leg press for the odd lifts. And the bent press is going to go straight in D tier. Why do a bent press if you can do an overhead press? Why do a bent press if you could do a seated shoulder press? Why do a bent press if you could do literally anything for your upper body? I think it looks cool, you know? If you can bent press a lot of weight, I think that looks cool. But again, you have no way of really judging that because people don't really do it. You know, it's not the world's strongest people out here doing bent presses. It's not professional powerlifters doing bent presses. But if you want a good developmental exercise, this isn't what you're going to look for. Rest pause squats. I think that they're very stimulative. I think they have S tier stimulation, but the problem is that you're just wiped out after you do them, and you can't do anything else after that. Particularly if you just go ape on them, like you don't do anything else but 20 rep squats. That takes a lot more out of you as opposed to doing, say, we'll say for example, a 12 rep rest pause set. I think our Street Fighter 3 third strike music is elapsed, but we're at the final part. We don't need the music. You're here for the long haul. Yeah, I just think that it's limited because it just overwhelmingly dominates the rest of your program. We're on the final chapter. Do you want to help with the rest of the tier list? That was me yelling to my wife. I got the microphone in my mouth, so I don't want to, or near my mouth, so I didn't want to yell, but we're going to move on. Maybe the wife will help with the rest of this. Maybe they won't. But rest pause arm work, on the other hand, though, I think is a lot better usage of your time because it's not so stimulating because the weights are a lot lower. You're able to get the benefits of rest pause, which is getting in more tough reps without there being a bunch of weight. So I'd probably put that in A tier. So right now, I'm going over the user-submitted entries for the exercise tier list, and maybe you can give your opinion on some of these. So we just did rest, pause, arm work, or floater exercises. I forgot to mention this, but if you're doing rest, pause, like ab exercises, leg raises, or wrist curls, that's fine as well for the same reason. That would also go in A tier. Because it gives you that really good stimulus without taking a lot out of you and making it so that you can't do anything else. You ever see someone do an incline bench press before? It's like a bench press with the slope.
Yes.
What do you think about the incline bench press? Get closer to the microphone.
Wait, can you explain it again? I know you said
It's
an
an
incline.
get on this side of the microphone. Freaking gains Goblin. Yeah, so they can hear you. You're very soft spoken. Hold on, fellas. Here she comes. So the incline bench press. You know the freaking bench press where it's usually some guy at the gym where he's laying on the slanted bench. What do you think about that? What tier are we putting that in? B tier is like basic, and anything above B tier is it's like an elevation of the basic exercise.
Oh, well, I put it at hobo because I don't like arm exercises.
It goes in hobo tier. Fellas, I guess I'm just gonna put it in hobo tier. I was gonna put it personally in freaking S tier, just because. And I'm not gonna bother you too much. I'm gonna let you go back to relaxing. I love you.
Love you too.
Yeah, we just wanted to get our freaking opinion on incline bench, I guess. But yeah, dude, I was gonna put it in S tier because it has more range of motion than a flat barbell bench press. It works the shoulders really well, and it works your upper pecs. Now, that's just dependent upon which level of incline that you use. I've made a few freaking different videos about how to determine that. Look in my playlist to check that out. But I guess it's going in hobo tier. Moving on, though, street lifter dips. This is specifically doing dips in a way to lift the most amount of weight possible without targeting the muscle well. And I picked a picture of Baki. I'm not trying to do Baki dirty because he's jacked. Baki is this French guy that does calisthenics for a living. I think street lifter dips have to go in D tier, man. I find that doing them that way, I felt like they did nothing, honestly. And I feel for you to get a good return, well, I'll put them in C tier, C minus tier. I feel for you to get a good return on them, you have to get really, really strong at them. So what's easier to get bigger pecs? Do normal dumbbell press or normal dips, or get a 400-pound weighted dip, which most of y'all, including myself, are not going to be able to do in your lifetime. The answer is clear to me, unless you just think it looks cool and you want to do it because it looks cool. Next fellow wanted to know about the croc row. I think that the croc row will go in C tier if it's done well, and D tier if it's not done well. I think that the point of a croc row for most use cases is to overload the upper back. And on paper, it makes sense because, as I said, a little bit of athletic movement makes sense on rows to be able to milk that stretch a little bit more. But from what I have seen, Most people, when they do croc rows, they don't keep tension on the muscle and they're just flinging the weight up and down and using a ton of muscles other than their back to do so. And I see a lot of people who they have big croc rows, but they have baby backs. That's just the truth, man. Like there'd be some skinny fellas doing freaking 200-pound croc rows just because they saw Sticky Ricky do it with his massive back and thought, oh, I'll get a massive back if I do that too. I don't present problems without solutions, and one that I thought was a lot better overall as an exercise, which is why I'm putting them right after each other, is the cable row, specifically with some flexion. And I picked Scott Herman for this just because I think he's who most of us learned a lot of our exercise selection from, because he made tutorials for everything back in the day. I'm going to put them in S tier just because I find that you're already doing that little bit of athletic movement anyway. That athletic movement in this puts your lats in a position to be stretched really well that you can't typically get on most rows. On top of the tension that you get when you move your torso back a little bit, it feels good on the upper and mid back. It just feels good. Whereas moving my torso a little bit on more athletic rows that I like doing with the barbell, I don't necessarily feel tension just from doing that in of itself. Listen, I'm a fan of Klokov, Dmitry Klokov. I think he's a ridiculous Chad. I think that he's a lobster mutant freak. I think that he would destroy Larry the Lobster in a fight. I think that Klokov presses are not a great exercise. I think that they're a good test of mobility. I think that they can maybe be a good warm-up exercise, but I would never do this over a regular behind-the-neck press or dumbbell seated press, which is pretty much what I would present as the alternative. I'd put the seated dumbbell military press somewhere in B tier or A tier, since you can get a deeper stretch on it than the barbell press if you do them right. But yeah, I would. I've never prescribed a Klokov press, and I've never seen a professional bodybuilder do them. I've never seen a professional strength athlete do them. Almost even in weightlifting, I'm not as in tune with weightlifting, so maybe it's used a little bit there just for the shoulder mobility. But for most intents and purposes, I don't think that it's a great lift. Johnny Banana back lift, freaking Jefferson curls. I already talked about them. I do think that it's the one old school, old timey lift that does have some use case, because you are stretching your hamstrings and you are fully flexing the lower back. So you're working the lower back in a way that it doesn't work on hip hinges, which could have its use cases for really advanced bodybuilders that want to. They've done heavy hip hinges. They've built a really big foundation on that, and maybe they just want to work that particular part of the low back for whatever reason, or particular function of the low back. Sometimes as an advanced lifter, to move the needle, you have to try stuff like that and turn over stones to see what they do in terms of forward progression. But that's a very limited use case. If I see someone who deadlifts 2 plates doing a Jefferson curl, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to belittle them. I would just think in my mind that there are a million other things you could be doing for your posterior chain that are a better use of your time. So one of them being the back extension. The back extension is a nearly perfect lift. It's pretty much a good morning, but on a back extension machine. It's just harder to get into position with the bar behind your back, but the exact same way you would program the good morning, you would do the back extension. You could also hold the barbell in your hand, snatch grip, but you're still not getting the full stretch that you could if you put the barbell on your upper traps. But it's still a fantastic exercise, and it's much, much, much better. And I have to enunciate that because I don't want. Listen, man, the hamstrings are not getting no extra range of motion just because you're going down lower on the Jefferson curl. The extra range of motion that you're getting is from your back flexing. That's not doing anything extra for the hamstrings that you couldn't get on an RDL, but with way more weight, it looks cooler. Listen, man, I don't like Jefferson curls, and back extensions are way better. End of story. And if you don't agree with that, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are, because I'm open to them. I love Dorian Yates. I don't love Yates rows, just because They have limited use case, I would say, for overloading specific parts of the upper back if you feel like you need that. But as a whole, I think that they are worse than like a regular barbell row or a flexion row or a super wide grip pull up for developing your lats and your upper back. I think that they have a more limited use case, which is still valid. And tons of people I know, a good friend of mine, we'll call him D. He's pretty jacked. He's very jacked actually, and he does his rows kind of like this at my gym. Which is, I'm not going to tell him he's wrong because he's jacked, but personally, if I were him, I wouldn't be doing a Yates row. I would get a better back workout of just hinging at the hips more and stretching the upper back better. But that extra load does allow you to hit your mid back in a way that rows really can't with the same amount of weight. Single arm dumbbell row, I feel like, is a better usage of your time. And again, this is done with good form. It's not a dumbbell row done with shit form. And there's so little icons here, and I still can't find it, bro. Like, this is how you know I'm getting old. Here we go. There's like 12 icons left, and I still can't see simple shit. Dear God, the freaking single arm dumbbell curl or dumbbell row. I don't know how many times I said dumbbell curl, fellas. Unk is tired. We're at the end of the video. All right, understand? I wasn't doing that for engagement for you to correct me, but I think that a dumbbell row with good form is like a croc row in principle, but performs a lot better. So you're not using anything other than maybe a little bit of dynamic movement in your scapula and pushing your shoulder down in the arm you're not using to move your torso in a way to allow you to get a better contraction on the back and then moving it forward to get a better stretch on it and to use a good balance of load and tension, just like what the idea is with the row. You're not flinging it around and mowing your lawn like the croc rows. I think that that's a better usage of your time than Yates rows, and that's why I have them listed after one another. Hindu squats from the Chad Great Gama. He was the one that I think everybody got them from. I think that they're a fine finisher exercise. They're not better than any other quad exercise that we've talked about other than the shit tier, hobo tier, barbell leg press. Okay. Better use of your time, in my opinion, in most cases, if you're looking for good accessory volume, is either a hack squat or a leg press. Now, the hack squat versus leg press debate, which is better? I personally think that the leg press is better, but I think the hack squat looks cooler. So where do we rank them? This is the Bells of Steel hack squat, by the way. As you can see, it lets you get a full deep range of motion, and that's the way that you're going to need to do them to get the full benefit. I think that the leg press is probably better on paper, so I'm putting it in Mutant tier and the hack squat in Dragon tier, just because the hack squat does still have some axial loading, meaning it does still load your back, even though it loads it less than a back squat. You still are loading up a good amount of weight on it as well. Whereas the leg press, and I'm critically thinking here, yeah, I think the leg press is better because it doesn't have that axial loading. Based on how your leg press is built, it still can fatigue your lower back if it has to round, but there are ways to hedge that. Like you can put a pad underneath and behind your bum. Dr. Mike has made plenty of tutorials on that. You could watch that on his channel. I'm not going to explain that to you. But there are ways for you to hedge that. Now, overall, I just think the leg press is better in that regard because it doesn't fatigue your back. And if you're looking for something to just smash the legs, I think the leg press per rep is going to do a better job of that. Next up, the Kelly Snatch. Where do you think this odd lift is going to go? D tier, hobo tier. What does this work, bro? What is this doing? This is a showman lift. This is a lift you do to get clicks on Instagram. This is not something you use to develop any of your muscles. It's not even the full Arthur lift. The Arthur lift is the one where you behind the back deadlift it and then run it up your back and then behind the neck push press it, right? That looks cool. This doesn't look cool in my opinion, and it's not effective exercise. Nordics are really trendy with people. I think that they're strictly just worse than a hamstring curl. Most people aren't even strong enough to do them properly without assistance or some sort of regression. And if you're going to do all that, if you're just looking for something that stretches your hamstrings, a way better use of your time is to just do a seated leg curl, which I would put in A tier. As we said, hamstring curls in general are a good idea for developing your hamstrings. I just find that if you're going to do that, pick the lowest barrier of entry, one that's still doing what you want it to do. Y'all are not going to be able to do, because I can't do it. So on average, I know that most people watching it aren't going to be able to do it, because most people are newer lifters that watch YouTube content or intermediate. But even if you're really, really strong, bro, you're not going to be able to do 3x10 strict Nordic curls. That's beyond professional athlete shit, bro. They're professional football players that can do a single set of 8. We're talking about people that are bred and selected to be fucking freaks, and they're only doing sets of 8. Come on, man. Let's just be real about how useful this exercise is. Zotman curls. I think they look cool. I think that just do either a normal dumbbell curl or a reverse curl. I don't find personally that they combining shit sometimes don't work the way that you think it will. Now, if you're looking for something to specifically load the brachialis in the forearm, I think the reverse curl, which I put in my Dragon Slayer tier and that I would put in Mutant tier, is a lot better of a exercise. But even if you're not looking to do that, I think hammer curls are pretty good. I think reverse curls are just better because, I don't know, man. I feel like they just work the biceps a little bit better, and I feel like they work the forearms better as well, because it's easier to cue wrist extension than it is having your wrists pointed up while they're neutral for most people. Because that's how you would work your forearm, is to have your wrists pointed up. Katana extensions. These are really trendy on TikTok. They're just overhead extensions with a cable, bro. They're not any better than a regular barbell overhead extension, in my opinion. Oh, here's reverse curls. Holy shit. That's why I was looking for a baldy, and it's just some guy's chest. I told you guys I was getting old. All right, neck isolation. I really bought into this for a period of time. In the past, I might have put it in B tier because most people want to have a thick neck. I think that if you need to do some extra neck isolation, or if you want to get to a certain size, like I wanted to get to like an 18, 19-inch neck, and I got to that, and I haven't trained my neck in directly, and I would say 3 months now, and my neck measurement is exactly the same as it was when I was doing it. I think there's a point where you really got to evaluate, what am I going to need to do to get a bigger neck, and am I willing to do that? Am I happy with the results that I have? If you're happy with the results that you have, provided that you are training hard in your hip hinges and your rows, and just training in general, I don't think that neck size is something that you're going to lose. This is something that I can't believe I didn't mention until now. This was something that I learned from Faz Lifts, that he learned from a gentleman whom I believe his name is Paul Kelso. His last name's Kelso for sure. He wrote Kelso's Shrug book. A Kelso Shrug is essentially, you can either do it chest supported, you can do it on a cable row. The idea is to basically, in a rowed position, move your scapula, so your shoulders back, squeeze them, and then lower them under control. And it's a way of working your mid-back. I'm going to put it in A+ tier. I think that it has a definite use case that you can't find in anything else unless you get extra upper back volume. I think that it's best combined with a regular row, though. So you do the regular rows, and then you do the Kelso shrugs after you can't do full range of motion reps anymore. I still prescribe Kelso shrugs literally all the fucking time, though. They're an incredible exercise, and I'm really glad that I learned them from Faz. One that I used to we'll say pimp a lot. I think I'm late enough in the video where I can say stuff like that without getting demonetized. But one that I used to prescribe a lot is easy bar upright rows. For me, I'd say they're a B tier exercise for most. Despite my many efforts to show people like ways to do them without hurting their wrists or their shoulders, I find that it's just a higher learning curve for most people who aren't as kinesthetically aware as some others may or may not be. I do find that the cable upright row is that B tier lift though, because it's a lot easier to find a position again, because on a cable, just like we mentioned with at the beginning or near the beginning, it's easier to manipulate how it feels by stepping back or stepping forward or moving the cable stack up or down. Find something that feels comfortable on your shoulders. For that reason, I'll put that version of it in B tier. But one that I think is probably better than both, to be honest with you, for the side delts at least, is the cable lateral raise. You're able to get that fully stretched tension on the rear or the side delt in a way that I don't feel like you get on dumbbell lateral raises, which I'll put in C tier. They're fine. You can do them really well. Humility has to lead the way, as Jeff Alberts likes to say, with lateral raises, because you can end up using a lot more weight and working the side delts a lot less than you think you are. To put it into perspective, Jeff Alberts is a professional natural bodybuilder, and he's extremely jacked, and I think he uses the 30s. So you put that into perspective. For that same reason, the side or the dumbbell lateral raise isn't very loadable for you to use good form that's effective on it, because eventually you do have to use a little bit of body English to progressively overload them because of the strength curve of the movement. And I just feel like the cable lateral raise just allows for more smooth progressive overload. Front squats from the beast himself, the boss, Dan Green. I think they're B tier. I think that they have a lot of use cases. I've made videos talking about them. Watch those if you want more insight on them. I don't think that they're bad for your shoulders. I don't think that they're necessarily worse than squats because they have a learning curve. I think that they have great carryover to squats when done skillfully. I think that they're a good way of loading the legs with less load than your squats, which allows you to squat more often without beating yourself into the dirt. I think that they're good for stabilizing your upper back and your spinal erectors during squats and hip hinges. Dan Green would also talk about how they had carryover to a sumo deadlift, funnily enough. He did a podcast with Pete Rubish. Fuck my video. Watch that. Do a search for it. You'll find it. Trendy bullcrap mace training. It looks cool, but come on, man. You're not going to get jacked from swinging a mace around. Come on. It's a worse shoulder prehab, I would say, than just doing power raises and getting strong. We're down to the last couple. How are these going to rank? What is this? I don't even know what that is. So this one is the lying dumbbell tricep extension. I think that this is an elevation over like a basic barbell tricep extension just because it's more comfortable on your shoulders, it's more comfortable on your wrists, and because it's those two things, you're able to customize how you interact with the movement a lot more freely than you can with a barbell, because a lot of people find that skull crushers hurt their elbows and wrists because you're not really able to manipulate where you position those things on a barbell version of it, which is not an issue for some people. It's not been an issue for me for a long time, but for some people, especially older gentlemen or for people with injuries, that's stuff that you got to keep in mind. Now here, we're going to compare two unilateral exercises. I think that a basic RDL would go in S tier, mutant tier. When we're talking about the single leg RDL and the split stance RDL, I think that the single leg variation is going to go in C tier. I think that it's worse than just a regular conventional deadlift, honestly, just because of the stability factor and not being able to load it up very heavily. I think that the split stance version of it, I think that it's good. I don't think that it's necessarily better than a regular Romanian deadlift. I think that it's a good variation of it to be able to do more hip hinging more often with less load, and to be able to work their hamstrings in a way that's a little bit different than just doing Romanian deadlifts again, while being pretty much as good, while also being able to work your hamstrings unilaterally. Since that back leg is pushed back, you're isolating the front leg, but you're also getting stability from that back leg being posted. So really smart hack with that exercise. This is sandbag training. I think that sandbag training is ridiculously chatty. I think you can use a sandbag on weighted ring push-ups to load them, on back extensions to load them. As a whole, though, with every sandbag exercise that you can do, I think some of them are just worse than basic versions of those movements, like sandbag overhead press, um, sandbag tosses, so like a version of the kettlebell swing, except for you're tossing the sandbag. Those are all cool and primal and everything like that. And I think they look chatty, but I just don't think they're as effective as basic exercises for the most part. Reverse grip bench press, I feel, is an elevation of the barbell bench press because it works the upper pecs better, and it also feels better on the shoulders while also working the triceps a little bit better too. And last but not least, this handsome gentleman that Bells of Steel must have just hired, because I've never seen him on the ad stuff before, is signifying the trap bar deadlift. I think the trap bar deadlift is overhated. I just think that it's overhated. I think that it can be done in a way that doesn't target your muscles well at all. If you meme lift it, or you basically squat into it and you're super upright and you're not stretching the upper back or your hamstrings or your glutes at all. And it's a clown lift at that point. And you have to lift some tremendous loads for me to even look twice at it. So like when the fucking guy on YouTube trap bar deadlifted 1,000-something pounds and freaking fell over after, or when Sticky Ricky trap bar deadlifts 900, 1,000 pounds, it looks cool. But if I see someone doing that same style of trap bar deadlift with 405, it's not as good of a developmental exercise. But that's a skill issue. You can use the low handles. Even with the high handles, you can hinge forward more to be able to use a more even mix of all the musculature involved in a hip hinge. It doesn't just have to be a clown, essentially rack pull, basically. It's only that way if you make it that way. But as a whole, it's perfectly valid as a developmental tool. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good basic exercise. If it wasn't, then it wouldn't be prescribed in professional sports weight rooms. It wouldn't be prescribed in college weight rooms, high school weight rooms. If it wasn't a good foundational exercise, they wouldn't be doing it. Now, they also do some bullshit in those things. Don't get me wrong, like the Bosu ball stuff and all the resistance band bullshit. But that's just for the camera. When it comes down to actually training their athletes, they don't use anything that isn't going to actually make them better. That's the whole point. But that is the 2024 exercise selection tier list. I think that we were more thoughtful this time in terms of the way that we ranked things. I just didn't throw a bunch of things in S tier arbitrarily because I thought they were cool. I tried to give y'all good food for thought about what the basics really were, what was worse than that, and some elevations of the basics to be able to add to your program. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Watch these videos wherever they are on the screen now that you've watched this one. Have a great day. And subscribe.